Claire never imagined that a quiet summer could change everything she thought she knew about herself, her marriage, and her heart. Life had settled into a calm, almost predictable rhythm since marrying David 3 years ago. He was dependable, steady, and kind, the kind of man who believed in schedules, budgets, and quiet evenings in front of the TV. Claire respected him, appreciated him even, but somewhere along the way, passion had slipped out of their marriage like air escaping a balloon. She didn't resent it. She had simply accepted that this was how adulthood worked. Until the day David's son, Ethan, came to stay. It began with an unexpected phone call in early June. David told her that Ethan had finished college and needed a place to stay for the summer before starting his new job. Claire had met Ethan briefly at the wedding, a polite, reserved, young man who'd shaken her hand and congratulated her fatherly, almost awkwardly. She hadn't thought much about him since, but when she hung up the phone, she felt a strange nervousness. Maybe it was the thought of another person in the house. Or maybe something deeper that she didn't yet understand. The day Ethan arrived, the sky was heavy with summer rain. Claire watched from the kitchen window as he stepped out of the cab. Tall, confident, his hair damp from the drizzle. He looked older than she remembered, more defined, with an easy smile that carried a hint of mischief. When he walked through the door and hugged her hello, the warmth of his presence filled the room in a way that caught her off guard. "Thanks for letting me crash here for a bit," he said, dropping his bag. "It's good to see you again, Claire." "You're home too," she replied with a small smile. "I'm glad you're here." From the first evening, it was clear Ethan's presence would change the rhythm of the house. David was still buried in work, gone before sunrise, home after midnight. But Ethan was there helping in the kitchen, fixing the loose porch light, talking about the world like it still held endless possibilities. He had energy, warmth, and curiosity that made the house feel alive again. For the first time in months, Claire found herself laughing, not the polite laughter she gave David during small talk, but real, sudden laughter that surprised her. Days passed quickly, each one blending into the next. They shared breakfasts and late dinners, watched old movies, and talked about everything: books, travel, even silly things like why the neighbor's cat refused to leave their porch. Ethan had a way of listening that made her feel seen, like her words mattered. And the more time they spent together, the harder it became to ignore the quiet pull that had started to grow between them. One humid evening, when the air was thick with the smell of rain, the power went out. Claire was in the kitchen lighting candles when Ethan walked in, his phone flashlight cutting through the dim light. "Looks like we're on candle duty," he said, smiling. They laughed and moved around each other easily, finding candles and placing them around the living room. When the house glowed in soft light, they sat down, the storm rumbling faintly in the distance. "I don't think I've done this since I was a kid," Ethan said, stretching out on the couch. "Blackouts." "No," he said, smiling, sitting still, talking, just this. Claire looked at him for a moment, realizing she hadn't done just this in years either. Life had become a checklist of responsibilities: work, meals, chores, quiet dinners. She'd forgotten what it felt like to simply exist in a moment that didn't demand anything from her. The sound of rain grew heavier and thunder rolled in the distance. She stood and moved to the window, watching the downpour. When she turned, Ethan was standing closer than she expected, his eyes on her face, soft and searching. "Claire," he said quietly, and something in the way he said her name sent a tremor through her chest. She stepped back slightly, unsure of what to say, unsure of why her heart was racing. "You should probably get some sleep," she said, forcing a light tone. "Yeah," he replied after a pause. "Good night." That night she lay in bed, unable to sleep. David was out of town on a business trip, and the silence of the house felt too large. She kept hearing Ethan's voice in her head, not the words, but the way he had said her name. It was gentle, hesitant, as if he didn't want to cross a line but couldn't help being close to it. The next morning she told herself to act normal. She kept busy cleaning the kitchen, watering plants, calling her sister. But when Ethan came downstairs, barefoot and smiling, all her rehearsed calm vanished. "Morning," he said softly, his voice still sleepy. "Smells like coffee. It's fresh," she said quickly, turning away to pour him a cup. "Thanks," he replied, sitting at the table. For a moment, there was silence. Then he said, "You're always taking care of everyone, aren't you?" The words landed heavier than she expected. She didn't answer right away. "I guess that's what happens when you grow up learning to hold everything together." She finally said. Ethan looked at her, his eyes filled with something that wasn't pity. It was understanding. "You don't always have to," he said. The way he said it, calm, certain, stayed with her. For days, she found herself thinking about it, even when she tried not to. She told herself it was just kindness, just attention she wasn't used to. But something deeper had already started forming, quiet and invisible, threading its way through their conversations and shared silences. One afternoon, she was folding laundry in the living room when Ethan came in from the backyard, his shirt damp with sweat, hair sticking slightly to his forehead. "It's like an oven out there," he said, grabbing a glass of water. "Welcome to summer," she said, laughing. He sat down beside her on the couch, close enough that she could smell the faint scent of sun and grass on his skin. They talked for a while about nothing, the garden, the weather, his new job plans. But then he said something that caught her off guard. "You know," he said, voice softer now, "I used to think my dad was the strongest person I knew. But lately, I think you might be." The sincerity in his tone made her chest tighten. "Don't say that," she said quickly, her voice almost a whisper. "Why not? It's true." She looked at him then, really looked. He wasn't a boy anymore. He was a man, confident, kind, and yet vulnerable in a way that felt raw. And for the first time, she realized how blurred the lines had become. The air felt heavier, charged with something she didn't want to name. She stood quickly, pretending to gather laundry. "I should finish this before dinner," she said. Ethan nodded, watching her carefully, then stood and walked toward the door. Before leaving, he paused and said softly, "You don't have to pretend around me, Claire." The words followed her all night. She told herself it didn't mean anything, that he was just being thoughtful, empathetic. But deep down, she knew it wasn't that simple anymore. Something had changed between them, and neither of them could undo it. That night, she dreamed of the rain again, of candlelight flickering against the walls, and a voice whispering her name through the storm. When she woke, her heart was pounding, her hands trembling. She told herself to stop, to bury it, to act like it never happened. But when she walked into the kitchen that morning and found Ethan standing there, his eyes meeting hers with quiet intensity, she knew she couldn't keep pretending much longer. And as he spoke her name softly, carefully, almost like a secret, Claire's world began to tilt in a way she could never fully control again. The following days unfolded like a silent tug-of-war inside Claire. Every time Ethan walked into a room, her heart reacted before her mind could stop it. She avoided his gaze, kept conversations short, and filled her days with unnecessary chores just to keep busy. Yet, no matter how much she tried, she couldn't stop feeling that quiet pull, the invisible current that connected them. David had been away more than usual lately. He managed several construction sites across the state, and his work often took him away for days. When he called, their conversations were short, mostly about bills, house repairs, or grocery lists. Claire had stopped expecting warmth from him. Their marriage had become practical, like a partnership that had forgotten how to feel. She didn't blame him. She blamed time. Time had slowly dulled the edges of everything between them. Ethan, on the other hand, was full of life. He noticed small things, the color of the sunset, the way the wind moved through the trees, the way she laughed when she forgot to be cautious. It had been so long since someone had simply seen her. He didn't have to say much. It was in his eyes, his tone, his quiet presence. And that scared her more than anything. One Saturday afternoon, the air was thick and heavy with summer heat. Claire was outside trimming the rose bushes when Ethan came out with 2 glasses of lemonade. "You'll pass out here," he said with a grin, handing her one. She took it, smiling despite herself. "I needed something to do." He sat on the porch steps, watching her work for a moment. You know, you don't always have to do something, he said. You can just be. She laughed softly. I don't think I remember how. Ethan looked up at her then, his eyes thoughtful. Maybe someone should remind you. For a long second, she couldn't find words. His tone wasn't playful this time. It was sincere, almost tender. She turned back to the roses, pretending not to notice the warmth rising in her chest. That evening, clouds gathered over the horizon again, and thunder echoed faintly. David was still gone. Claire cooked dinner anyway, out of habit. Ethan offered to help, and together they moved easily around the kitchen, cutting vegetables, teasing each other about the right way to season pasta sauce. It was simple, effortless, and for a moment, felt like family. When they sat down to eat, the storm began outside, the sound of rain drumming softly against the windows. Feels like déjà vu, Ethan said, smiling. Yeah, she replied, remembering that night of candlelight and thunder. But this time something felt different, closer. Heavier dot after dinner, the power flickered again. Claire sighed, shaking her head. Not again. Guess we'll have to light the candles, Ethan said, standing dot soon. The house was glowing once more in warm, flickering light. They sat together in the living room, the sound of rain filling the quiet. For a while, they talked about small things, his job plans, her garden, the book she'd been reading. But then silence settled, soft and thick. Ethan looked at her, his expression unreadable. Claire, he said quietly, can I ask you something? Of course, he hesitated. Are you happy? The question hit her harder than she expected. She opened her mouth to answer, but no words came. She looked away, staring at the candle flame instead. I'm fine, she finally said. That's not what I asked. She sighed, her voice trembling slightly. Ethan, life isn't always about being happy. Sometimes it's about keeping things steady. Kay nodded slowly, but didn't look away. You deserve more than steady. The air between them thickened, every second stretching longer than it should. Claire stood abruptly, trying to escape the moment. It's late. You should get some rest. Claire, he said softly. She froze. He stood too, his voice low. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. I know, she interrupted quickly. It's fine. Ah. But her heart was racing, and she didn't understand why hearing her name in his voice shook her so deeply. She left the room without looking back. That night, sleep didn't come easily. She lay awake, listening to the rain. Every word, every glance replayed in her mind like a slow echo. She told herself it was wrong to feel anything, that she was older, married, responsible. But the more she fought it, the more she realized this wasn't about attraction alone. It was about being seen, understood, about feeling alive again. The next morning, the sun broke through the clouds and everything looked fresh, washed clean. Claire tried to treat it like any other day, but the tension lingered. When she walked into the kitchen, Ethan was already there making coffee. Morning, he said quietly. Morning. He handed her a cup. Their fingers brushed for a moment, a small accidental touch that sent a spark through her. She pulled her hand back quickly, pretending not to notice. Ethan looked like he wanted to say something, but stopped himself. Instead, he smiled faintly and said, Dad's coming home tomorrow, right? Yes. He nodded, his expression tightening slightly. Good. The rest of the day passed quietly, almost too quietly. They avoided being alone together, both pretending not to feel what was there. But that night, as Claire sat on the porch, watching the sky fade to purple, Ethan stepped outside. He didn't speak at first. He just stood beside her, watching the horizon. Then, softly, he said, I'm sorry if I've made things strange. She turned to him. You haven't. I think I have, he said with a small smile. But the truth is, I can't stop thinking about you, and I hate that it's complicated. Her heart pounded. Ethan, don't. I know, he said quickly. I know it's wrong. I'm not asking for anything. I just needed you to know. She stared at him, torn between reason and feeling. You shouldn't say things like that. He nodded, but his eyes didn't waver. Then I'll stop saying them. But I can't stop feeling them. The silence that followed was unbearable. She stood and walked to the door, her hands trembling. Before she went inside, she whispered, "We can't do this." "I know," he said softly. "But tell me something, Claire. Have you really stopped feeling too?" She froze, her breath catching. Then she went inside without answering all night. His words echoed in her head. Have you really stopped feeling too? It was the question she'd avoided for years. Not just about Ethan, but about her life, her marriage, herself. She had built walls to keep everything safe, everything proper. But now those walls were cracking, and she didn't know how to stop them from falling. The next morning, David returned. The house felt different instantly, structured, predictable again. Claire smiled, cooked breakfast, asked about his trip. Everything looked normal, but inside, she felt miles away. Ethan was quiet that day, polite, distant. Their eyes didn't meet once. Over the next week, the house returned to its old rhythm. David and Ethan talked about work and plans. Claire stayed in the background, pretending everything was fine. But deep down, she knew things weren't the same. Something invisible had changed forever. Then, one evening, when David was in his study, Ethan came to the kitchen to grab water. Their eyes met just for a second, and in that look, everything was said without a single word. The distance, the longing, the ache of unspoken truth. He whispered, barely audible, "Claire." She turned away quickly, her heart aching. She didn't answer, but tears filled her eyes. And in that quiet, she realized something painful. Sometimes love isn't about being with someone. Sometimes it's about letting go before the world takes notice. But letting go, she knew, would be the hardest thing she'd ever done. The following week, tension settled over the house like a quiet fog. Claire moved through the rooms with practiced ease, but inside, everything was unsettled. Every glance, every small word from Ethan lingered in her mind, making ordinary moments feel loaded with unspoken meaning. She tried to keep busy laundry, grocery lists, planning meals, yet even mundane tasks were colored by his presence. David remained oblivious. He was focused on work, emails, and calls that took him out of the house for hours. Claire was grateful for his absence in one sense, but it left her alone with thoughts she couldn't fully confront. The quiet, she realized, wasn't comforting anymore. It was full of reminders she couldn't escape. Ethan, for his part, acted polite, careful, and restrained. He avoided stepping too close or saying too much. But there were moments, a lingering look while passing her in the hallway, a hand brushing hers by accident, that set her heart racing. They both knew they were skirting an invisible line, a boundary neither dared fully cross, but both felt bending under the weight of unsaid feelings. One evening, the sky painted itself in shades of orange and purple as the sun began to set. Claire was on the porch, sipping tea, lost in thought, when Ethan joined her. Holding his cup quietly, "You're quiet," he said, settling a chair next to hers. "I've been thinking," she admitted softly, almost whispering. About everything," she said. "About life, about us, about what I've been ignoring for far too long." He nodded, silent, attentive, giving her the space to speak. That was the thing that always pulled her in, his ability to listen without judgment, to simply be with her. "I don't know why I feel the way I do," she continued, her voice trembling slightly. "I've been married for so long, and I've accepted a life that's safe, practical, predictable. But then you're here, and it's like everything I've pushed away comes rushing back." Ethan's expression softened. "Claire, I feel it too. But we can't act on it. Not while you know. Everything else exists." She nodded, swallowing hard. "I know." For a long while, they simply watched the sunset together. Two hearts beating fast, words unsaid hanging in the air. The world felt distant. Time seemed to slow. It was in that silence that Claire realized she didn't need to act on her feelings to acknowledge them. Sometimes recognition alone was enough. Over the next days, Claire tried to create small boundaries for herself. She avoided moments of privacy with Ethan, focused on her routines, and reminded herself of David's place in her life. She had made vows, built a life, and though the stirrings of desire were real, they were secondary to the life she had promised to protect. Yet the heart is rarely rational. One afternoon, a thunderstorm rolled in, rain tapping against the windows. She and Ethan were in the kitchen, preparing dinner, when the power flickered and went out. They lit candles, their faces glowing in the soft flickering light. "This storm reminds me of before," Ethan said quietly. "Before what?" she asked, glancing at him. "Before life got so complicated," he admitted, his eyes meeting hers. "Before we had to pretend we're okay with boundaries that hurt us more than they help." Claire felt tears prick her eyes. She wanted to turn away, to escape the moment, but she couldn't. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice breaking. He hesitated. And for a heartbeat, it felt like they could step across that invisible line. But then he took a deep breath and stepped back, respecting the unspoken rule that had to remain in place. "I can't," he said softly. "Not ever." The weight of his words hit her. Relief mixed with sadness. She realized she had been waiting for him to act, to give in to the pull, but the truth was, restraint held more power than surrender. Their connection, electric and undeniable, was real. But it didn't need to be acted upon to exist. Days passed. And with each sunrise, Claire felt a quiet acceptance growing within her. She began spending more time with David, noticing small gestures she had ignored, the way he straightened a picture frame, the way he hummed quietly while reading the newspaper. She realized love could evolve and grow without the thrill of forbidden desire. Sometimes it was about comfort, companionship, and shared history. Ethan continued to be part of her life, naturally and gently. Their conversations remained warm but careful. They laughed, shared small victories, and occasionally glanced at each other in moments that reminded them both of what could have been. And yet, both of them understood the boundaries clearly now. Respect didn't diminish connection. It deepened it. One evening, as autumn approached, Claire and Ethan were walking through the backyard, enjoying the crisp air. He stopped near the old oak tree, where sunlight streamed through the leaves. "Claire," he said softly, "I want you to know that no matter what, I'll always care about you. Not in the way we're not supposed to, but in the way that matters, as a friend, as family." She looked at him, her heart full but steady. "I know, Ethan, and I care about you too. In the same way." The tension, the longing, the unspoken ache, it all transformed into something different. A mature, quiet love that didn't need to break rules to exist. They had crossed emotional boundaries in thought, but in action, they had chosen integrity. That choice, painful as it had been, gave Claire a strength she hadn't realized she possessed. Winter came, and with it, a sense of closure. Claire watched the first snowflakes fall, feeling a lightness she hadn't known for years. Ethan was inside, helping David with a repair project. She smiled quietly to herself. Life was full of challenges, moments of temptation and emotional storms. But it was also full of beauty, forgiveness, and quiet victories. In those months, Claire discovered something important. Emotional honesty didn't require action, and longing didn't require surrender. By acknowledging her feelings without acting on them, she preserved her marriage, maintained family harmony, and still experienced the depth of connection she had feared was lost. One rainy afternoon, as she sat reading by the window, Ethan joined her with a cup of tea. They sat together in companionable silence, listening to the rain, the warmth of the house wrapping around them. She realized the heart could hold many truths at once: love, desire, loyalty, and respect, and that the richest life balanced all of them carefully. Claire looked at him and said softly, "Thank you for understanding." Ethan smiled. "Always," he said. "Always." And in that moment, the house didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt alive, full of possibilities that didn't require compromising values or losing oneself. Claire knew she had faced a test of her heart, her morals, and her courage, and had passed. She had embraced the complexity of human emotion, allowed herself to feel deeply, and yet remained true to the people she loved. The storm, both literal and metaphorical, had passed. And Claire, watching the sunlight reflect off the wet leaves, understood that some of life's most powerful moments weren't about what was done, but about what was chosen not to be done. In restraint, she had found freedom. In honesty, she had found peace. And in the quiet understanding between her and Ethan, she had discovered a love that didn't need to disrupt the world to exist. As the day ended and the house settled into evening calm, Claire whispered to herself, almost in awe, "We survived the storm." Ethan, from the other room, heard her and smiled silently. He didn't need to respond. The quiet agreement between them was enough. Their connection, profound yet restrained, remained intact, a testament to emotional maturity, personal integrity, and the quiet power of human bonds. And with that understanding, Claire felt a lightness in her chest she hadn't felt in years. Life would continue, full of its routines, surprises, and challenges. But she now carried with her a newfound clarity that the heart could feel deeply, without acting recklessly, and that the most meaningful connections were often those tempered by respect, patience, and the courage to choose wisely. The house was warm. The rain had stopped, and for the first time in a long while, Claire allowed herself to smile, genuinely, fully, peacefully. She had faced her emotions, confronted temptation, and emerged stronger, wiser, and more alive than ever.